he views life as being two mountains. The first mountain we summit within the first 35 years of our life as men tends to be centered around success and power and status and wealth, and rightly so. Like, I'm not here to tell, men they shouldn't be ambitious. Like, go do that stuff. But if you stay on that climb for too long, the rewards start to become less and less important. And the view starts to change. And so what tends to happen is we come off that first mountain into the valley between the two. And that is the archetypal midlife crisis, mate. That's where people are lost. They're lost in the valley, in the jungle at the bottom. They can't find the way out.
Turning to Next 45 now, talk to me about the genesis. Was there a lightning bolt moment where you decided this is what you wanted to do? Or was it more the culmination of everything you'd been through over the previous 15 or 20 years that led you to the conclusion that, I guess, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but, men were lost, men were living with regrets and needn't do so?
Yeah, it's a good question, mate. So, at 40 years old, I'd served our country for 20 years. So half of my entire life I've been in service to keeping the country safe. And then lockdown happened and everyone was worried about the jobs, right? But I got this sense that I wanted to row across this ocean, and I rowed across the ocean primarily to raise money for charity for the hospital unit that saved my youngest son's life. So I had a really strong pull towards doing that. And I decided to resign from the MOD because they wouldn't support the row. And when I resigned and gave up that 20-year career and the pension and everything else to just see what that life without limits looks like, I was mindful that I felt a bit different and I felt a bit lonely. What they don't tell you in the military and in the MOD is that when you leave, you don't really stay in touch with people. You might have a few mates on Facebook, but you're not part of the gang anymore. And life moves on. And I was kind of stuck at home thinking, man, I feel a bit crap here. And then I started to think, well, but I've achieved all this stuff. I've done loads of stuff. What about everyone else? So I just started to look into the statistics around men's health. I wasn't feeling in any way suicidal. I wasn't feeling depressed. I was just felt a bit lost. And I was absolutely staggered by some of the statistics that I was reading. And then I started to think, when was the last time we had a conversation about men? There's been conversations around toxic masculinity, but that's not about men. That's about a problem in society. But we've had great conversations around feminism and race and gender and equality and all that good stuff. And we've made huge progress in all those areas. But at no point yet, still today, Joe, have we had a societal conversation about what it is to be a guy, all the challenges that men face specifically to us. And then I read a book called The Second Mountain by David Brooks. And it was almost like he'd written the book for me. It was everything that I was thinking at that time. And I'd encourage anyone to read it who's kind of navigating that midlife piece. And so the first business I registered was NXT45. But I knew that I didn't have all the skills necessary to help all men. So I approached two really good friends and jiu-jitsu students of mine, actually. One is an ex-professional rugby league player and a specialist in health transformation, physical fitness and nutrition. And one is a former multi-billion pound CEO turned stage 1 trained health psychologist. So I tried to build this little team, and then we co-founded Next 45 together. And I think that was really important we did that, because we now believe that we have the necessary skills, the broad range of skills that you need to help men. But that's how it started. And we've only been going for a year. It's been in my mind for about 5 years, but we've only actually been going for a year. We delivered our first flagship event last year in September, the 100 on X45, which was amazing. And when I told people I was going to put 100 men in a field with no booze, no women, ice baths, yoga, breath work, fire cooked food, group workouts in a castle, paddleboarding, wild swimming, everyone thought I'd gone mad. They said, Mike, no one's going to come. But they did come, and it changed people's lives.
So why do you think the conversation around men's health, specifically men's mental health, still isn't happening? Because if you look, as you have done, at the statistics around leading causes of death of men of certain age, it's suicide. Why do you think the conversation's not happening?
I mean, when we started last year, 3 out of every 4 people who killed themselves were men. Within a year, it's now 4 out of 5. So the trend's getting worse. And there's loads of statistics around young boys as well. So it's not just middle-aged men, but, young males who grow up without a father figure. And they're 50% less likely to succeed at school. 76% of people in custody have grown up in a fatherless home. So I think the reason why we haven't had that societal conversation is men are expected just to get on with it. Man up. Stop moaning. There's this kind of like societal pressure just to be okay and have it nailed and protect and provide. And we haven't got past that yet. And one of the challenges for men is that we just don't talk enough. We're not honest enough and vulnerable enough about the way that we feel. Because when we show that vulnerability, we naturally feel shame because I'm not a real man. And I suppose what we're trying to do in Next 45 is say that vulnerability is your real strength. That's the greatest strength you can have. If you can be open and honest to the world about who you really are and how you feel, there's no strength greater than that. So I think that's the challenge at the moment, is getting men to speak. And they're not talking, mate. They're engaging in risk behaviours to mask how they really feel. So they're drinking and they're taking drugs and they're gambling and looking at porn. And we're trying to find new ways with Next 45 to help men navigate that process.
Given your vantage point, are you positive about the trend of men's health, or are you not so positive? So I'm interested, just given your perspective, where you think the abundance of education, resource, technology, there's a lot happening that could move conversations forward in the right direction. But from your viewpoint, are you positive or not about the future?
I'm a positive person, Joe, so I'd like to think we can make a difference. And I'd like to think Next 45 will be in some way able to start or change a conversation around men's health. But honestly, the statistics going in the wrong direction, mate. It's not looking good. I have noticed since the kind of genesis of Next 45, as you put it, that there has been a little bit of a change. So you've got kind of big kind of people with platforms like Joe Rogan speaking about this kind of stuff, Chris Williamson speaking about this kind of stuff, you're speaking about it, the BBC have done some stuff around what it is to be a man. So that we're starting to have that conversation. But it takes, of course, men to engage in it. We can push information out all the time. And we do that at Next 45. We send a free newsletter out every week with insights and tips and tools to try and help, become a better person. But you need that person to want to engage in it. And I think we're going to, you're trying to undo millennia of men being the provider, protector. You've got to nail it. You've got to get it right. And that's going to take a while.
Well, for every positive male role model with a platform, there's inevitably going to be somebody who maybe isn't a positive role model. And, Andrew Tate is the name that springs to mind as someone who I think personally has found a huge audience by being a role model, telling men what their place is in society, especially young men, because they don't know. They're confused by this toxic masculinity backlash. They don't know their role in society. They feel like their natural urges and feelings are somehow bad. How do we begin to combat the likes of the TikTok generation in terms of them getting their information from people who do not have their best interests at heart?
I think it's got to start at home, hasn't it? Every child has a father. And so our message in Next 45 is that, when men live happier, healthier, more fulfilled lives, everyone wins. And that means you're better fathers, you're better leaders, you're better partners, better friends. So I think if we can create this understanding of men of the responsibility as a father to really help guide those young people, because the people who are listening to Andrew Tate, it's because they've got no one to listen to in the real world. And they're looking for someone to tell them what to do. It's why I joined the Royal Marines, as I said at the beginning. So I think if we can try and create this movement within men to become really good, positive male role models, I think that will make a huge difference, because you can't stop the TikTok generation, mate. You can't stop the internet. It's not going to happen. What we can do is start to add that positivity into our young people from home, I think. That's what I try and do with my boys.
We've talked about some of the negative or the challenges. What about the positives? What about the bright sparks? Where are you most encouraged that we can move the needle in the right direction, Mike?
Oh, mate, we've seen it. We've seen it within our community already. People who came to the 100 last year, the feedback was, and you can see this on our Instagram and our YouTube channel, that it was a life-changing event. And we've seen guys within that period from September last year to now, lose 3 stone or spend more time with the kids or work less or whatever it is they need to do, because it's different for everybody, isn't it? So I think there's some real positives there. We've got a phenomenal little community in Next 45 that we're nurturing, and each one of those individuals is a real champion. And I think it's that kind of ripple effect that we're looking for here. It's not going to be a big splash front page news, let's have a chat about men, and we start to have it. It's these conversations we're having today, mate, and someone listening to it, it resonates with them, and then they go and tell someone else. I think that's really how it's going to work.
I want to ask you a quick 2-parter, Mike, or it might not be quick depending on how deep we go into it. What's your advice for men of our age who are feeling a little bit lost? They've got the responsibility of, providing for their family. They might have young kids and elderly parents to take care of. They're trying to navigate this transition that you went through. So that's one thing. Where did these guys begin in terms of improving both their mental and physical health? And then the follow-up to that, what's your advice to younger guys? If you could go back, although to be honest, you going back and talking to your 16-year-old self, probably, you did the right thing anyway. But what about advice for younger guys who are trying to navigate this maze that is manhood in the 21st century? Where should they look for advice and support?
Well, to your first point, I think the middle-aged man is undergoing a transition between their first and their second adult life. David Brooks has said in The Second Mountain really articulates this well insofar as he views life as being 2 mountains. The first mountain we summit within the first 35 years of our life as men tends to be centered around success and power and status and wealth, and rightly so. Like, I'm not here to tell men they should be ambitious. Like, go do that stuff. But if you stay on that climb for too long, the rewards start to become less and less important. And the view starts to change. And so what tends to happen is we come off that first mountain into the valley between the two. And that is the archetypal midlife crisis, mate. That's where people are lost. They're lost in the valley, in the jungle at the bottom. They can't find the way out. And what we're trying to do at X45 is get people onto the second mountain. Because the second mountain is all about fulfillment and fatherhood and positive relationships and self-care and vulnerability. And I think those are the things we should be aiming for in the second half of our life. Mentoring other people, helping other people get better themselves. That's where the real currency is in life, I believe, is helping others. So getting onto that second mountain is really important. And for the young people, and for the middle-aged guys as well, I'd say just stop for a moment and just think about what you want your life to be at the end. When you turn back round and you look at the last 90 years, 100 years, what do you want to have achieved? What do you want people to say about you in the church? If you want to say you were a good dad and a loving family man, spend some more time with your kids. Stop going to work every day. It might be that you want him to say that he was a successful business founder and entrepreneur. Great, go work more. But you've got to make sure you're looking ahead. And it's unique to everybody. Everyone's got their own view of how they want their life to live. But far too many of us, young and old, don't even think about it.
You strike me as someone who's always had a sense of purpose. But for a lot of men, both young guys and guys in that midlife valley, purpose is something that they've probably not even considered, let alone know how to find. What's your advice for someone? How does somebody find their why, Mike?
I think you need to, again, stop for a moment. And I do an exercise with people when I do workshops on this about understanding who you are first. So you've got to understand who you are. And so I'd say, what are your top 5 values? What do you value the most in life in terms of behaviors? What are your top 5 anti-values? What are the things you hate in other people? What about the virtues that you try and purvey into the world and those behaviors? And then the difference between resume virtues and eulogy virtues. What do people say about you at work? What do they say about you at home? And in that church I talk about. So I think it's really important to look inward and have a period of self-reflection. Again, talked about the young people here. There's far too much noise and influence coming in that we rarely stop to think about, what do I actually believe? What do I actually think? And then just follow that path. And I think in terms of purpose, it's finding that deeper why. It has to be intrinsic. I worry for my kids because a lot of their motivation is extrinsic. They're going to put it on Snapchat. They want to put it on Instagram. The mates want to say this about them. It's got to be a deep internal intrinsic why. Those motivations, and that might be to raise a loving family. That might be to help people in society. That's certainly my purpose in life, Joe. That's why I served our country for 20 years. That's why I continue to try and serve in my businesses. It's helping others. And when you know that, every decision you make is quite simple.
Does it worry you that so many young people are seeking external validation at all costs over everything else? Because to me, I've spoken to a lot of experts around this subject, Mike. No one's got an answer. No one knows how to stop it. Aside from physically taking your phone away from your kids, how can we begin focusing specifically on boys and young men here? How can we help them? Because their entire world is in the palm of their hand, and that's where they're seeking approval and validation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm no expert, so let's get that out on the table right now. You're not speaking to if you want to speak to a psychologist, speak to Joe, our co-founder. What I would say is I think it's about self-worth. I think it's about children understanding that they are good enough for all their strengths and all their weaknesses and all their flaws and all their amazing attributes. They don't need to be anybody else. I have this challenge all the time, my youngest son, who continues to try and be someone else, be a character of himself, because he thinks that's what other people like about him. I'm like, just be you. The thing they like the most is you. So it starts again with parents and positive role models, particularly male role models for young boys. It's really important that, particularly in their formative years, they have, might not be a dad, but he could be a coach, it could be a teacher, it could be a friend, whatever, an uncle. Someone just to keep reaffirming that they are enough. And I think if we do that enough, we'll end up in a place where we're quite content.
Is this where team sport can be such a useful tool for young men, not just because of the exercise, but that sense of brotherhood we mentioned at the start? It seems to me that's such an important part of finding your tribe, and a far less risky way than joining the military perhaps would be to join a sports team. Is that something you'd encourage?
Without a shadow of a doubt, mate. I mean, I run a jiu-jitsu academy, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy, that I founded in lockdown as well. We've got 500 students training with us. 300 and odd students are under the age of 16. And the beautiful thing about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and it's the same in rugby and it's the same in the military, is that it's the shared adversity that builds those bonds. That's really important. So, we don't want to wrap our kids up in cotton wool. We need to give them a little bit of adversity. We need to show them that they're capable of more than they think. When you do that with other people, it creates super strong bonds. So absolutely, team sports are key. Jiu-jitsu, people would say, is an individual sport or a martial art. I always say to my students that the moment you understand that jiu-jitsu isn't just about you, it's about your training partner, then that's when the magic happens. So yeah, absolutely, mate. We've got to surround our young people with other young people striving. We've got to give them a bit of adversity, make them struggle a little bit, and prove to themselves that they are capable of more than they think. The one thing I wanted to talk to you that strikes me as being such a huge part of men as they transition into the second half of their life is not something they can necessarily control. It's the menopause. It's their partner going through unbelievable life changes that most men, until they get to that point, can't even fathom. How important is that? Well, I've seen statistics around the percentage of marriages that break down because of a lack of communication, the breakdown of trust. How important is it in your philosophy for men moving forward that they're better educated and can better support their partner? Because it might not directly be happening to them, but it's indirectly affecting every aspect of their lives. Yeah, I think it is happening to them. I think, testosterone drops, strength power drops after the age of about 40. And so hormonally, men are different in the second half of life, and that can leave us feeling a little bit kind of off. Well, man, I used to be able to do this, or I used to have, my libido used to be like this, and it's not anymore, and it's going to change for sure. So I think it's accepting that you will change as well. And again, that conversation, we haven't had that really. It's all been around TRT and, but we've got to have a bit more of a broad conversation about that. On the menopause and on relationships, I've learned that the most important thing in life is human connection. And the best human connection is between you and your partner. So nurturing those relationships and being there for your wife or your husband is so important. One thing that we do two things actually. So every Friday morning is scheduled in my diary There's no meetings can happen because I go to the gym with my wife. And we train together, we have a coffee or some lunch together. And we make sure we spend just a couple of hours, me and her, talking about how she feels and understanding where she's at that week. And then we train together on Sunday morning as well. We have this mantra that when you train together, you stay together. Again, it's that shared adversity. It's seeing the person that you love suffer and come through. That builds that kind of trust. So I think men need to accept that they will change. You will feel different. Don't hide it. Don't start drinking more. Don't start trying to mask it. Go and figure out what's going on. Go and see your doctor. And then carve out specific time. If it's not in your calendar, it doesn't exist. So put it in your calendar. You're going out with your partner once a week for 2 hours just to be together. So important.
You mentioned TRT there, Mike. I'm really interested in your thoughts. I spoke to, I saw an interview with Dr. John Berardi, who was the founder of Precision Nutrition, who has this theory that lower testosterone levels in the middle part of a man's life helps them transition to this wise elder, where they exhibit a lot of the attributes you mentioned, more patient, more understanding, more caring. Whereas a lot of the behaviour you described in the first half of men's life, the ambition, the power, could be described as testosterone-driven traits, right? What's your take on TRT? Are men, by following this course of action, still then harbouring some of the desires or the motivations from the first half of their life that might not necessarily be helpful in the second half? That's
a really good point. And again, that guest will know a lot more than me about the subject. What I would say from my own experience, and I'm someone who's on that kind of pathway through TRT to figure out whether or not I want to use it, because my testosterone is the same as a 70-year-old. And you'd be like, this guy just rode across an ocean, but I literally have my testosterone free test and total test is off the scale low. And so I'm not being my optimal Mike. And that I resisted it for many years. I was like, should I do this? Should I not? Oh, it's juicing. It's cheating. It's not really you. But the more I think about it, the more I think, why would you not want to be optimal? You get one life. Why would you not want to feel great? Why would you not want to have a strong libido? Why would you not want to be able to go and move some weights around in the gym? That is living, man. And that's not just in the first half. I think I'm not sure about, the lack of testosterone, helping men to become wise elders. You're still going to be wise because that's the experience you build over time. That's where wisdom really comes from. It's not just a hormonal thing. It's the experiences you've had. But if you could put the same drive that you had in the first half of your life into others, into your relationships, into your own personal health and well-being, life would be a way better place, man. So I keep that drive, just shift the focus away from money, power, status to relationships, health, friendships.
I guess it's having had that life experience and also some of the excess. You don't maybe need it as much, and that's going to allow you to do more of the other roles you've mentioned. I also just want to talk to you, Mike, really quickly about Next 45. Looking into your crystal ball, what do the next 5 or 10 years look like? Because you've obviously an ambitious guy. You're obviously an incredibly determined guy who can move mountains. What are you going to do over the next 5 or 10 years? Paint me a picture of what the business is going to look like and what contribution you're going to make to society.
So I'd like to think within the next 5 years, we will be the leading voice for men in midlife. I think we'd like to have started a conversation in society about men. And I think we're going to see that. I can see that starting to shift now. And I hope that we've been in some way a catalyst to men being a bit more open and having that conversation. Certainly, I feel we were a little bit ahead of the curve when we started last year. As I've said earlier, we've started to see some other people in that space talking. I'd like to think our events are full. We run the 100 every September for 100 guys. We're about half capacity at the moment, which is still an amazing achievement. 50 guys come in and spending some time on themselves for a weekend. I think that'll be full. And then we want to branch out and create a pathway for leaders specifically to support men who are still ambitious and running companies, and also fathers as well. So we want to do an event around fatherhood where you can bring your child with you and create some amazing memories and start to improve the life of those younger people as well. So I think we're very much just at the beginning. You know what it's like starting a business, Joe. We are just hustling. There's no one's getting paid. We're just working really, really hard. But I'd ask everyone to go to nxt45.com, sign up for our newsletter, The Journal. It's free. Every single week you get insights from Joe in psychology, from Johnny in sport nutrition, from myself in mindset, and just start to connect with others and share it.
What is the initial response when people discover you? Because I imagine there's a pent-up demand for this, because there's not a ton of services, if any, offering this. Is the initial reaction from middle-aged guys like, where the hell have you been?
You get two reactions. That's one. And the other one is, I'm absolutely fine. And it's the guys who say they're absolutely fine who are absolutely not fine, by the way. So, yeah, there's still that kind of protective mechanism that a lot of men have, particularly guys who've been successful on that first mountain. And they don't want to lose what they feel like they've got. And my view of it is you're not losing it, you're just changing your focus a little bit. So there's those guys who put up the wall and, we're not forcing anyone to do anything. You got to lean into this. We hope to change their viewpoint over time. And then there are guys that are like, man, I desperately need this. And we saw a few of those gentlemen come to the event last year. And like I said, it was life-changing. And you said there's not a lot around. Like, I looked really hard for a few years to find something out there for men like this. And of course, you've got great organizations like Andy's Man Club, you've got man sheds and things like that bring men together. But they tend to be like a meet up for a cup of tea once a week and a chat, which is great. This is great. What we try and do with our app is connect people constantly. We put on real world events. We have online masterclasses with experts every month to try and give those tools and insights. So yeah, two types of responses, mate. And I'm hoping that we can bring everyone on board to start this conversation.